Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show in a new format, Confessions of an Illuminati. 20 years. We are celebrating 20 years of my Confessions online with this new special edition. It's of course been since the beginning of the year that we have been indulging you with this new format that I hope you all enjoy. And today we have a very special show, so get ready. First of all, let's thank our sponsors here. Let me pick up. Okay. So sponsors of today are Margot Zadaminta and Daniel Estes. And if you want to become like them, sponsors of this show, you can do it through GoFundMe or Cash App. You can find their Cash App handle on leozagami.com. And of course, we are also thanking all those people who have purchased the book of the moment, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster. Today we will be focusing, though, on Epstein's secret work for the Vatican. Yes, as they say, this actually got them to live inside the Vatican. He was particularly connected to John Paul II, but also the other popes, because he's played some kind of ambiguous games in which officially he was trying with Steve Bannon to bring down Pope Francis, but at the end of the day, there were people actually asking him if he could get him in contact with the Pope, if they could get him to actually give them a good word to intercede and accede to the Pope, which is something that everybody wants to do, guys. I mean, I remember, because people know I've been working a lot with the Vatican. I always have people asking me, oh, maybe you can arrange for me, maybe I can have the possibility of having a blessing with the Pope or getting to see the Pope. This is something that happens often. And in a couple of occasions, I actually helped out these people. Even famous people that came from Hollywood were sent to me by Oliver Stone, I remember, and I got to help them out in a way. But aside from all this, Epstein, today we are gonna disclose some incredible things that you never heard anywhere else, because we have also a new article that I just published on leozagami.com, which I want to talk to you about. It's my latest article about Jeffrey Epstein, about the Zodiac Club, and the Vatican Bank, how these three things come together. And what is the Zodiac Club, which is mentioned in the last batch of the Epstein files? Well, if you want to know more, stay with us. In the meantime, let me thank our sponsors like we usually do with this applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because, guys, I know that you would like me to be here present more than once a week, but our sponsors are few and scarce, and I also have to promote my books and other shows, so to compensate. But if you want, you are encouraged to help us out. I repeat, with both the purchase of my books, the latest one, but also all the others, volume 12, all the various volumes of my confessions and all the other books, and or the donating, it's also a great opportunity. So you can join people like Margot Rosada Minta and Daniel Estes, who have helped us today. Okay, Now let's go into my latest article, and then we're going to discuss also why Epstein was so connected to the Vatican, so linked to the Vatican. That understanding can only happen if you read this book and learn the connections that the Sabbatian Frankists always had with the papacy. And that's why this Polish Pope, and Poland in particular, is the epicenter of the Sabbatian Frankist heresy, and it's been for a very long time since Jacob Frank arrived there and brought to the Catholic Church 20,000 converts. So it's very important to understand that there has always been a connection, historically speaking. And so maybe today we should first of all explain a little bit more about this connection before moving further with all the other links. His conversion was not sincere, of course. Jacob Frank was born in 1726. He claimed to be the reincarnation, as you know, of Shabbatai Zevi. He died in 1791. He was once the most notorious Jew in Europe, just like his predecessor, Shabbatai Zevi. He was, though, regarded as a villain, a scoundrel, a pervert, and a heretic. After rumors of secret orgies and heretical rituals, Poland's rabbinic leadership reported him to the Christian authorities as a heretic, and in 1759, Frank led the largest apostasy in Jewish history, leading thousands to convert en masse to Catholicism. But the conversions, like I said, his conversion and the other conversions were not sincere. Frank told his followers it was only a step forward towards even getting territorial independence, or perhaps the Messianic age, as he thought of himself as the Messiah. And when this whole thing was discovered, he was thrown in jail for 12 years, but he didn't end up in any kind of jail. Like I explained in my previous article, which I published a few days ago, it was very successful. It was also published on Infowars.com. In this article, I explain that Jacob Frank was thrown into that monastery in this privileged, let's say, because it was quite a privileged place where to spend his time, in this monastery where there is a famous relict, the relic of the Black Mary of Czestochowa. And this is a very important relic for both, from that point onwards, for both the Catholics, but also at that point also the Sabbatian Frankists, because it had been an important relic for a few hundred years in the Catholic tradition, but it also became a very important relic for the Sabbatian Frankists. This is a Black Madonna. A Black Madonna, like I explained in volume 12 of my Confessions, which is a very important book, which you should all purchase because it's the last book of my Confession series dedicated to the old seeing eye on top of the pyramid. So the Black Pope who presides over all the various secret societies, the Jesuits, and also the Jesuits are linked to the Sabbatian Frankists. So this book is very important. Now, we know that the Jesuits, like I explained in this book, worship a female goddess, either Isis or other goddesses from the past, under the disguise of these black Holy Marys, like the one in Czestochowa. And the one in Czestochowa was also very dear. It was the Virgin Mary and the Christ Child, represented from the 14th century Byzantine icon, were worshipped in this Jasna Gora monastery in Poland by none other than John Paul II. But for 12 years, that's also the place where Jacob Frank resided. So there is this interesting overlapping of things that, and then who freed Jacob Frank? It was the Russians. The Russians who at that point had made a deal with the Jesuits and arrived there to free Jacob Frank, who at that point, upon his release in 1772, had a second career as a kind of 18th century cult leader in his castle of Offenbach, there near Frankfurt, where he laid the basis also for the future banking cartel. Families like the Rothschilds and many other families, the Schiff, the Warburg, all the important family, Ashkenazi families that laid the base for the present banking cartel that rules, unfortunately, the financial world today. So as Frank's infamy faded upon his release in 1772, he followed with more political intrigues, alchemical experiments, and also working with the creation of underground esoteric movements, the Asiatic Brethren within Freemasonry, which also saw the direct involvement of Moses Dobruska, who was a cousin of his, the actual son of his direct cousin. So Frank's late career borders on the unbelievable. We have Frankist sect members like the ones I describe in this book that ran guns for the French revolutions, the ones founded a Masonic order, conducted secret rituals and bizarre paramilitary exercises with this castle, Borough Castle in Moravia. Eventually, they would actually help create Poland's professional class. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu's family is so influential. They come from that Sabbatian Polish background. And they brought about the Jewish Enlightenment in Prague. And they count among their descendants the Polish national poet Adams Mickiewicz, and the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, which also I talk about in this book, and I also talk about his wife. These are very important figures. In fact, here I show some of these liberal Sabbatian Frankist figures. We know also that Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, as I said in the past, thought he was the reincarnation of Jacob Frank. But let me move further. So we have here Frankism might seem a failure to some people, but in reality, it foreshadowed developments that will transform the Jewish world, including secularist reform and Zionist critics of the Jewish religion, which are born out of the Sabbatian Frankist milieu, and contemporary Jewish spiritual movements, which are definitely in debt to the Frankist heresy, for sure. Frankist teachings have even made it into the writings of contemporary anti-Semites on the internet, or at least those who are defining the Sabbatian Frankist as a problem of race. I never defined it as a problem of race. I think that David Icke is actually unjustly accused of being an anti-Semite. He said, David Icke, and this is important to at least be honest about it, he wrote that to understand Sabbatian Frankism is to understand the world. And I completely agree with Icke. For Icke, to understand the Sabbatian Frankist, it's also understanding the Zionists, the Rothschilds, and all the others, as well as the Saudi royal family, their connections, the Wahhabi connections. And in a way, you know, David Icke describes also the involvement of the Domeh, who are the Sabbatians within the Islamic milieu. Maybe he doesn't really do it in a way that is too clear. I mean, he says to understand Sabbatian Frankism in the trigger is an important thing, but maybe he should have been more specific. Now I'm just adding to what was the lack of knowledge about something that has been only seldomly discussed in recent years, even by Jewish or Israeli, even Israeli academics or Jewish academics in general around the world. Jacob Frank believed to be the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi, and he was part of the Sabbatian movement. He was believing that there could be some kind of redemption through sin. And in this redemption through sin, astrology had also some importance in all this. So that's why today I want to add to the latest article, which I've written a few days ago about Epstein living in the Vatican, also this new article, which is gonna further bring into the mysteries of the Epstein files with stuff which nobody else is discussing, like this mysterious Zodiac Club. Now, it's very important to understand that the way that the Jews and Judaism understand astrology is slightly different from how we perceive it. So first of all, we need to explain that. Early speculative Freemasonry and also somebody like Elias Ashmole, who was also a member of the Royal Society, demonstrates that astrology was very dear always to people within the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons. In the 17th century, astrologers populated the speculative lodges of Freemasonry. We had, the Egyptian rite of Count Cagliostro, who was a great expert also on the zodiac and in astrology. Now, we know that Jeffrey Epstein had a temple on top of Little St. James, a particular temple. And in fact, the New York Post reported on December 22, 2025, psycho-financier Jeffrey Epstein Twisted Pedophile Island included an unnerving temple like building featuring an elaborate ceiling mural depicting signs of the zodiac and a pair of ratty mattresses. The cube-like building, adorned in Grecian style blue and white stripes, was erected at the highest point of his sprawling private enclave in the U.S. Virgin Islands, flanked by palm trees and positioned overlooking the sea on a two-tier stone terrace decorated with bold pink geometric shapes. Here you have this incredible, it's rather incredible and very detailed representation depicting the signs of the zodiac in the temple on Little St. James. Now, let me tell you, astrology and astronomy are the foundations behind many religious teachings of today. But there is much more to Epstein's seemingly weird astrological reference in his temple. Many traditional Jewish Kabbalists believe in a form of astrology known as Mazalot or Mazarot or Mazalot. There is various way of stating this. So Mazalot means viewing the stars and zodiac signs as spiritual channels that transmit divine energy. Both terms refers to celestial bodies or constellation, though they appear in different biblical contexts and have distinct historical usage. Mazzaroth appears only once in the Bible and is generally interpreted as referring to constellations or the zodiac sign. Mazzaroth, also spelled Mazzaroth or Mazzaroth, which appears in 2 Kings 23:5, is widely understood in Jewish tradition to refer to the 12 signs of the zodiac or planets. However, like I stated before, there is a difference in the way astrology is perceived in Judaism. I want to send also my regards in the meantime to the people who are following us all over the world, including Moscow, including Italy, including other parts of the world which are tuning in even with a different time zone and maybe not an easy time of the day to watch us, but they are still following us live. In any case, the Jewish interpretations differ from our interpretation or from the interpretation in the sense that the traditional Catholic, for example, shouldn't even follow astrology. It's officially forbidden. But in reality, if you go and visit certain places that belong to the Catholic tradition, you will see often reference the zodiac signs. And it's done at times in a cryptic way. During the Renaissance, there was always references in various, like in Villa d'Este, is filled with zodiacal references. And the d'Este family was, of course, a member of the Black aristocracy and very close to the Vatican, in fact, involved with various popes. So the Talmudic teaching Ein Mazal, Israel, clarifies that while astrological signs may provide a map or incline a person towards certain traits, they do not dictate destiny. Jewish scholars, such as Rashi and Rabban, explain that divine providence and human free will always supersede the influence of the stars. So while Catholicism prohibits in an hypocritical way, because then if you go and see, there is always, Catholics are always the first ones to believe in anything that comes out of the astrological world, especially when you go in Italy or in Spain or in other countries, you will have on TV, the signs today for the day are this, blah, blah, blah. They will tell you, for each of the zodiacal sign, what's going to happen in the day. And these shows are popular on TV, on the radio. So astrology is definitely very popular amongst Catholics, even if it's in theory forbidden. When it comes to the Jews instead, and to Judaism, they actually say that there is, an influence there. They say there is an influence, but that influence can, in a way, be bypassed if you are, if you're praying. But when it comes to the Jewish interpretation, the influence of the Mazalot can be viewed in the cosmic order, can be viewed as a specific Hebrew month, as in reference to a tribe of Israel, and also in reference to distinct spiritual qualities. So there is also the fact that there is a bunch of synagogues which have this Greco-Roman sun god surrounded by the 12 zodiac signs. Like, for example, the Ben Alpha synagogue is no longer, I think, a synagogue. I think now it's probably a museum in Israel. And like that, there is many others that have the same kind of... I'm going to show you, just so you have an idea. This is the Bet Alpha. Sorry if I said Ben Alpha. It's Bet Alpha. The Bet Alpha synagogue is an ancient former Jewish synagogue located at the foot of the northern slopes of the Gilboa Mountains near Beit Shan in the northern district of Israel. And if you go and scroll down on their Wikipedia, you can see that there is a central panel, because it was discovered I think in the 1920s, this synagogue. And this is the zodiac wheel. The zodiac wheel, which is featured here, and it says that it says the zodiac wheel, along with other similar examples found in contemporary synagogues through Israel. There is many synagogues like the Naran, the Susia, the Amat Tiberias, Eusephia, Sephoris, who have this kind of reference, this zodiac wheel, and they rest at the center of what is still an ongoing scholarly debate. And it's interesting because it's a scholarly debate about the relationship between Judaism and in general Greco-Roman culture. Now we see the obvious reference to the zodiac, of course, inside the temple in Little St. James, but also we see the obvious reference to, like I explain in my book, this bathhouse in Aleppo, Syria, which was a notorious hotspot for the Dome, for the Sabbatians. So the connections are quite relevant here, and it's obvious that Jeffrey Epstein was rather interested in both the zodiac and there is in that particular synagogue which we just mentioned, there is also this binding of Isaac panel, which is rather interesting, connected also to the zodiac symbols and the seasonal busts that are labeled with the corresponding Hebrew names. So, as you can see, Jeffrey Epstein was definitely a Sabbatian Frankist who also had knowledge about the astrology. But let's not forget that astrology is a very important thing for billionaires, not for millionaires, but for billionaires. This is something that was stated by a very famous protagonist of the Zodiac Club. I'm talking about J.P. Morgan. So, what is this Zodiac Club? Why so much importance given to astrology? Let's dig deeper here. Now, traditional Judaism often cautions against astrology. The Sabbatians, though, utilized it to interpret the times, the divine, and the coming of their Messiah, Shabbatai Zevi. Afterwards, the Frankists, the ones that were born out of Jacob Frank's beliefs, used astrological symbolism not only to define their leader, but also to describe the journey of Jacob Frank and his followers through what they define as the abyss towards redemption, that as part of their redemption through sin, as I explain in my book on Jeffrey Epstein. After all, Zevi's name was linked to the planet Saturn, because Zevi, Shabbatai Zevi's name, Shabbatai in Hebrew, means Saturn. This is a very interesting connection, because we know that in occult symbolism, in astrotheology, Gnostic belief system, Saturn is connected to Satan. But there is also another interesting point which I want to make today. This point, it's an interesting point made by the esoteric and alternative researcher B.R. Taylor, who is author of various books, including The Metaphysics of the Gods, in which he says that we enter this new age of Aquarius. the shared, and as we enter this new age of Aquarius, the shared rulership of Saturn and Uranus will create a whole new array of energy vibrations influencing our consciousness. Taylor, and I'm going to quote him, says, "This will set the scene for a very interesting future." End of quote. And then he adds that we are going towards and towards the Saturnization of humanity, what he has defined as the Saturnization of humanity. And he says anyone aligning themselves with the energetic characteristic of Saturn would inevitably control the reins of power. So here we have this link with the reins of power: Satan, Saturn, Shabbatai. Now, for the Illuminati and certain occult Freemasons involved in the esoteric, in the mystic, magical traditions linked to the Sabbatian Frankists, Judaism in itself grew out of star worshipping cults in the area known as Canaan. To become one of the first groups to focus their attention, they became basically the Jews who were in Canaan, one of the first groups who focused their attention on Saturn. And as we progress through the age of Pisces, Christians adopted Jupiter, the planet of faith, optimism, and good fortune, while Islam clearly adopted Venus. In fact, Friday is a very special day for them. And Friday is connected to Venus. In fact, in Italy, you say Venerdì, the day of Venus. As these different groups drifted away from what we can say was a balanced polytheistic approach to star worship, each of them promoted their tradition as superior to the other. Tensions grew between opposing factions, and they set up the stage for future division. Over the centuries, the controlling elites have always used our divisions as mechanism to steer all concerned parties towards a greater centralization then of power. As Saturn is the planet associated with control, those idolizing its energetic frequencies are set to become masters over the rest. So if we identify Saturn with occult symbolism as Satan, and also a reference that is clear in astrotheology and Gnostic beliefs, Saturn is not necessarily a positive influence. Of course, though, then we have a difference in the Jewish tradition, where the reign of Saturn is also indicated as the highest planet, and for this reason is frequently associated with the arrival of the Messiah. And Zevi's birth, which happened on the 9th of Av, as they say in the Jewish tradition, Tisha B'Av, was viewed by his heretical followers as a sign, as a significant astrological and historical sign of his perceived redemptive role. We know he was a false Messiah, but let's not forget this connection of Shabbatai Zevi with the year 1666, in which he declared himself to be a Muslim, but he was forced into doing so by the Sultan, the head of the Ottoman Empire, forced him, but that didn't really terminate the will of his followers to keep on practicing this heretical form of Judaism. And that's why we had the Dommeh. Now, Jacob Frank's teachings, of course, they came later on, especially in the period 1784-1790, blended the antinomianism of the Sabbatian legacy. Antinomianism means that he was just like Shabbatai Zevi, going against the tradition that the religious tradition. Antinomianism derives from the Greek against law, which is the belief that a Christian or a Jew, freed from the obligation to obey moral laws or religious codes, often, it is, of course, the antonymy is a belief that they have to go beyond these obligations. And it's considered an heresy in most Christian tradition, but also in Jewish tradition. And it represents an extreme that opposes legalism, that opposes all the rules. That's why both Shabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank were challenging the rules. This antinomianism is difficult even to spell for me, sincerely, because it's a weird word. We don't often use it. But I suggest you go and check out this Wikipedia page about it, because it explains you a little bit about the context in which the Sabbatian Frankists have always operated. Now, in regards to the Jacob Frank, he blended these anti-religious elements of the Sabbatian legacy even further with Western esoteric elements and astrology, the use of magic, the study of immortal beings, positioning himself and his holy virgin consort within a syncretic myth that utilized Kabbalistic and astrological beliefs all together, and to signify worldly power and physical transformation. Now, out of these Sabbatian Frankist astrological beliefs came not only Epstein's obsession for the zodiac, but also the obsession of those who preceded him in the New York elite that built the little-known Zodiac Club. The Zodiac Club is an exclusive 150-year-old secret society based in New York City, made up of only 12 members at the time. It's very important, this club, because, counted among these past members, J.P. Morgan Sr., J.P. Morgan Jr., both of them were known as Brother Libra. And it's only 12 members at the time in this important club, which is mentioned in a mail that is very revealing, that you can find, of course, in Epstein files. This is the EFTA number, and this is the email was sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2010, and it says here, just got a note from Bob Peary. Now, Bob Peary is Robert Peary, who at the time was, he worked for both the Rothschild. He was a big guy. Definitely a big guy, a massive guy. He died, I think, in 2015. Here he is. Robert Peary was president of Rothschild in America. He was definitely a very important figure. I can tell you that the connection with the Rothschilds and Jeffrey Epstein is very strong, also in regards to the Zodiac Club. That's for sure. Let me show you in detail Robert Peary. Here it says he died in January 2015. He was an American lawyer, But most of all, he later practiced in New York, and he served in turn as co-chairman and CEO of Rothschild North America. And he was also the senior managing director of Bear Stearns & Co., where Jeffrey Epstein had worked. He had been the vice chairman of investment banking, SG Cohen Securities Corporation, and he was part, I repeat, of the exclusive 12 members, you can only have 12 members of the time, of this secret society mentioned in this Epstein files. And it's very important that we go through this mentioning all the details regarding the Zodiac Club, because by understanding the Zodiac Club, we will also understand further the connection of Jeffrey Epstein with the Vatican. So Jeffrey Epstein is receiving this email from an identified, redacted member of this exclusive secret society known as the Zodiac Club. He writes to him on August 6, 2010, with the proposal for actually is August 12, 2010, I think, from what I can gather here. And basically, there's a proposal for a new member of the club. And it's actually rather interesting and revealing, because it claims that the Zodiac is still very secret, and it's one of those last secret type societies. This is what it says here. So the Zodiac is one of the really cool ones. There are 12 members at any one time, and it's still very secret. They do really cool stuff. They have dinners in exotic locations. And it says here that if a member becomes basically, even if he's not dead, but he's senile, he gets put into the eccentric orbit, where at that point they don't invite him any longer. Anyway, the only way to get in is if someone else dies, if someone dies. That's the only way you can join the very exclusive. And I repeat, it's a very important club, and it's a very important secret society. In fact, I'm going to show you here in my article, I have explained why this secret society is so important. JP Morgan and the people associated with JP Morgan have always been connected to this important Zodiac Club, which for some reason, I mean, he received an email. Now, it's no wonder the statement, millionaires, I mean, the statement millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do, is always a statement attributed to JP Morgan, who for the whole course of his life, JP Morgan Sr. used an astrologer, but also JP Morgan Jr. used an astrologer. These people use astrologers. They believe in astrology. And it remains, of course, an enigma, this secret society, but it is very interesting, the fact that it helped in 1929, after when the Vatican did, there was, of course, this Lateranense, Patti Lateranensi, they call them in Italy. There was this deal that was reached between the Italian government of Benito Mussolini and the Vatican. It's called the Lateran Treaty. At that point, the Vatican was in very bad waters financially. And the head of the Vatican Bank of the time, the guy Bernardino Nogara, who was tasked with managing the Holy See's assets following the 1929 Lateran Treaty, strategically diversified the Vatican wealth to protect it from economic volatility. And who did he go and ask help for? As part of the diversification, he utilized international holdings, including gold and diverse securities, maintaining significant financial relationship with institutions like JP Morgan in New York, where, thanks to the Zodiac Club, he deposited and traded various stocks, bonds, and assets to preserve and grow the church capital, until things got messy in 2010 with the now former Vatican Bank President Ettore Gotti Tedeschi, which is also discussed in Epstein's emails, whose main task was to introduce an anti-money laundering law in the Vatican. What happened at that point? In 2010, an Italian magistrate seized 30 million from the Vatican accounts, including funds held at JP Morgan branch in Frankfurt. And at that point, that is also to do with the 2013 email to Larry Summers. Epstein suggested that leadership changes at the year were more significant than Pope Benedict's resignation. And in fact, 1 year earlier, JP Morgan in 2012, whose leadership is tied to the Zodiac Club, closed its Vatican Bank account at the Institute for the Works of Religion, IOR, that's how it's called. It's not called Vatican Bank, it's called IOR, which is Institute for the Works of Religion. And they closed their bank account. And it's not like, JP Morgan Chase had a bank account at the Vatican Bank, and they closed it because there must have been something they couldn't do any longer. They knew that these new laws will soon become in place, or even for the Vatican, because this European this lack of transparency could no longer be accepted. And so they said that they were leaving due to their concerns, but in reality they left before the Transparency Act could be put in place. So maybe they were hiding something, who knows? JP Morgan basically left the Vatican finances in 2012, and was also, we don't know sincerely what happened to the money that was confiscated by the JP Morgan in Frankfurt. Part of the money was confiscated, the majority was 26 million euro, were confiscated was confiscated by Italian authorities, but there was also another smaller sum of a few millions who passed through the Banca del Fucino, which was also connected to the black aristocracy of the Vatican, and some payments made to a very high-level member of the black aristocracy. Anyway, it was said by American Secret Aristocracy, which is a book published in 1987 by Stephen Birmingham, that JP Morgan was the founder of the Zodiac Club in the 1900s. But there is, however, an alternative version, a more accurate version of the history of the Zodiac Club, which is apparently available in 2 hidden volumes, which are to be found that cannot be accessed by the majority of us. And these 2 hidden volumes, which are called, they are 2 books in reality, though they are, of course, not publicly available. They're known as Records of the Zodiac. And in them, there are the minutes, the menus even, and the 158-year-old secrets of this secret society founded in 1868. So there is definitely a lot to learn about these people if we go and dig deeper and deeper, no, in their nobody was able to ever even access these two books that are at JP Morgan's Madison Ave Library. However, a journalist from The Gothamist in 2013 was able to finally have access to these two volumes, and it's from him that we know that the real founder of the Zodiac Club was a guy called Edward Elmer Potter, who was a native New Yorker, born on June 31st, 1823, and he was the guy who founded the Zodiac Club in 1868. Potter was a Columbia College graduate, known for his very successful Union campaign in North Carolina during the Civil War, known as Potter's Raid. Though, even if this club was, we can say the Zodiac Club is like many other products of the golden age of fraternities here in America, there is really a scarce material available on it because they kept the secrecy from the moment in which they started to see that things could come out, especially after the publication in 1920 of a book which is a particular book. You should check it out. I mean, it's a book about a society back then. It's called The Age of Innocence by a certain Edith Wharton. It was published in 1920. Apparently, this book was too revealing. And so in the minutes of, it's a little bit like the minutes of a lodge, a lodge of Freemason. In the minutes of this secret society, of this Zodiac Club of 1921, it reads that this book apparently was very much criticized because it was accused of revealing too much about the New York elite in the 1870s. So that happened 50 years earlier, but they were very critical about the fact that this Age of Innocence, written by this Edith Wharton, and it enraged the members of the Zodiac Club back in 1921. They accused even the author of betraying their social class by disclosing knowledge of their society. This kind of information we find because this journalist had access to one of these two books. So that's how we know all this. And apparently, in the account of the secret society, Frank K. Sturgis, who was at the time former president of the New York Stock Exchange, known as Brother Cancer, because each of these members had, of course, a zodiacal sign as a name. He argued that society during that era was refined, intelligent, and respecting, and he criticized Wharton for diminishing the reputation of a world in which her own family had played a prominent role. So apparently the Age of Innocence was a book that created a lot of problems for the elite. So definitely, guys, as this book is now widely available on the internet, maybe we should have a look at it and see what was so scandalous for the people of the time. This Age of Innocence. It doesn't seem so innocent after all. Now, moving further into our analysis, this secret nature, of course, of the Zodiac Club is important and it can be understood because the members are from the New York elite that, of course, Jeffrey Epstein was part of. I mean, he was definitely a very high-level member of what we commonly refer to as the Illuminati. In this other article, I also explain how he played a kind of ambiguous role also with Steve Bannon, because while he was criticizing Pope Francis with Steve Bannon trying to bring down in his words, Pope Francis. In reality, then we have somebody like this guy here, Andres Serrano, who created this pseudo artwork called Peace Christ, which is an heretical work that depicts a small crucifix submerged in a small glass tank of peace of the author. This guy was actually asking Epstein, after inviting him in 2012 to the exhibition he held for this, between brackets, we could say artwork, but it's not really artwork. In any case, we have to understand that with Andres Serrano, they were openly discussing about the fact that his artwork was upsetting Catholics. We can go through all the various emails in the Epstein files and find constantly criticism towards Catholicism by Jeffrey Epstein, who was, of course, not pro-life, who was, of course, somebody who when he could, he would definitely attack the beliefs held by the Catholic, but at the same time had this privileged position in the Vatican. He was blessed by John Paul II, as I've showed you in my book. And the Vatican also reaction to the artwork, which this artwork, if you want to call it art, I don't call it art. It's a monstrosity. But watch how the late Pope Francis welcomed and even gives thumbs up to Andres Serrano for submerging a crucifix into his own pee. I mean, this is insane. At the same time, Serrano was asking Jeffrey Epstein if a few years earlier, this, what you're seeing happened in 2023, and I talked about it in an article that you can find still here on leozagami.com, my website. Shocking. Pope Francis supports the satanic system of perpetual indulgence and welcomes anti-Christian art. That was the article I published back in June 2023. But then you have also the fact that when Andres Serrano wanted to see the Pope, when Epstein was still alive, he actually went to Jeffrey Epstein and asked for Jeffrey Epstein's help. On top of this, we have also these emails between people who were associated and very close to Jeffrey Epstein, including his accountant, who say, "Dear Richard, today I was washing the brushes, cleaning all lime washes, preparing myself to go back home as Mr. Epstein walked in. I showed him the sample. I worked last night on it, trying to express the 18 and finish that will survive on the wall and how it could look like today after this long... We have to recall how the early 19th century house was operating." This is about, of course, some embellishments in one of Epstein properties. It says, "There was no AC and the heating was just fireplace." Then at one point it says, "I think I succeeded in my effort and showed it to Mr. Epstein. To my surprise, he liked it. I also lime washed the columns, what they call balt. The covering of the surface with lime wash is the initial step for finishing them. We had short conversation and we further cleared future misunderstanding. He wants me to finish each column different. And when he was living with Pope John Paul II in Vatican, he looked at a variety of different columns captured in walls. He told me that every pope demanded to have a column from every conquered country, so that there is a collection of different columns in Vatican." And again, guys, the fact that he was living with the Pope, not only visiting and getting blessed by John Paul II, is more than shocking. The fact that this Zodiac Club was connected also with the Vatican finances is, of course, shocking. And like I said yesterday in a show I did with Michael Jaco, there is the possibility that during his time at the Vatican, probably Jeffrey Epstein spent also a lot of time at the Vatican Apostolic Archives, the former Vatican secret archives, because that's what this kind of guests do in their spare time. And there is like 53, 60 miles, I think, of between 53 and 60 miles of archives that one can go into. And Jeffrey Epstein might have had the possibility of visiting the archive, something that is not, of course, available even for journalists. The only journalist in recent times, like I stated yesterday in the show with Jaco, was Lester Holt. In any case, I want to thank the people who follow us today, because in regards to John Paul II, remember that the connection, like I stated earlier, is Poland. Poland is the place where Jacob Frank and his heresy arrived to a new level. In all accounts, popular and scholarly alike, there is definitely a very important presence of Jacob Frank in Polish life. And his theology and his beliefs are all entrenched with Catholic, he learned the Trinity in apparently while he was in Smyrna. He learned the Trinity in his younger age because there were certain Sabbatians who had already included Trinitarian aspects to their heresy. But these Sabbatian charlatans continued. And then when Jacob Frank built his own branch of Sabbatian belief, he also amplified this Trinitarian aspect in his belief. So there was a very strong Trinitarian aspect, though it wasn't the Trinity that Catholics believe in. It's a different kind of Trinity, of course. He will take these elements from the Catholic beliefs, and then, Frank was no rationalist. He inhabited the mythical world of superhuman beings who live forever, elf-like creatures who dwell in caves, and occult hero mages such as Balaam, the Queen of Sheba, Solomon, and Asmodeus. Frank describes a hidden world separated from this one by an impassable curtain he called the Zaslona, where Frank's counterpart, the Big Brother, leads a sect parallel to Frank's own, except that the Big Brother course has learned to live forever because they possess what they call the secret das, gnosis, which Frank sects, this is a concept that obviously then are also, combining elements of the Shekinah, and then the Frank's daughter Eve and the Black Virgin of Czestochowa, where he was in prison. All this, of course, is part of this heresy, the Sabbatian Frankist heresy, that, of course, was also followed by Jeffrey Epstein and by Ghislaine Maxwell, who, like I explained in this book, was considered the Shekinah or Shekinah, depending on the way you pronounce it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to our sponsors. If you want more show like this one, if you want more than one show a week, at that point, please support us even more with your donations, and we might start doing that. For today, thanks to Margot Rosada Minta and Daniel Estes, and thanks to all the people who, of course, has purchased my latest book, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, Exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the Most Powerful Jewish Sect in the World, the Sabbatian Frankists, as well as this book, Volume 12, which is a very important book to understand the Jesuits, who were, of course, also in Podolia, where the Sabbatian Frankists eventually started their heretical adventure. Take care, guys. Don't miss next week's show on Saturday. And here we are. Remember, always with information that nobody else gives you. You can also find my latest articles on leozagami.com.
Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep it
Bye bye.